I was on this mission. I was working my body. I was working my business. Things were going great. And then going from this high of high to being in the hospital with my son, fighting for his life, it was a whole shift of my whole world turning upside down.
Meet Mike Abramowitz, inspirational speaker,
multi-best-selling author, and transformational coach.
During that 8.5 months, my business ran without me and produced $250,000 in revenue and 6 figures of profits without me there. What were the foundational principles that actually led to time freedom? I call it being time rich. And I narrowed it down to 6 principles. Number 1 is
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. Jeff Lerner, your host. Always so thrilled to be back with you, having amazing conversations with amazing human beings. Today, we are joined by Mike Abramowitz. He has 20 years in the direct sales industry. He's trained over 5,000 reps, generated $19 million in product sales in that industry. He's also written 9 books, founded a charity that's provided over 100,000 meals to the homeless. And all of this is made possible by the fact that Mike has, I think, done what so many of us set out to do, which is create businesses and income streams that power our life so that we don't have to trade away all of our time just to get by. He's also a father and a husband. He runs a company that provides AI-powered virtual assistants to business owners to ultimately help them buy back some of their time as well. He also hosts the Better Than Rich show podcast and is a super cool dude, which we're going to get into. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chef. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I was struggling before we got going here to try to remember how we got connected. And I can't for the life of me remember, which I would say only speaks to one of the best things about being an entrepreneur and a creator in this economy, which is that there's just this sort of network effect that happens and you just meet all kinds of really, really cool and interesting people. So without any reference to how we got connected, I'm so glad we did. Yeah, let's just jump in. I mean, as we were talking before the show, what we're really about here, like, it's cool that you do all these really cool things. Like, that's cool. You probably think it's cool. I think it's cool. But what I think is even cooler is to understand how you became the person that would do all these really cool things and that would have this, kind of elite 1% life where you get to have your time and your money without one taking from the other. And so maybe walk me back, like take me back to, I don't know, whether it was childhood Mike or adolescent Mike or college era Mike, or, what version of Mike do you think, when did you start to feel a pull off the beaten path? And what do you think it is that happened to you or for you during that time that made it so that you emerged successful when so many others maybe don't on that path?
Well, I love this question. I'll give you the long short version or the short long version, either way.
Either one.
So 16-year-old Mike, maybe 15, I found a vending machine at a garage sale and I bought it for $50 and I put it in my back room of my house, and I would buy candy bars for 25 cents each and sell them for like 75 cents. And then I would throw big parties at my house when my parents were out and fill up the vending machine with condoms and snacks and get my one of my friends' older siblings to buy a keg. I would sell it for $5 a cup, and I would flip a party and make like a couple $100. So that was my version of a lemonade stand in high school. I didn't know that was called entrepreneurship. I didn't know that was running a business. I thought it was just smart ways to make money when mom and dad were out of town. And I wasn't even a popular kid. I actually was kind of like an awkward kid, but I saw an opportunity, went to college at USF in Tampa and started selling Cutco kitchen knives. So as I was pursuing my engineering degree, I started selling Cutco after my freshman year, and I paid my way through college. So I sold enough Cutco to earn 6 figures during college to pay my way through school. And I learned foundational principles during that time frame. I bought my first house when I was 20. After reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, instead of buying a car. So I had a 91 Mitsubishi Eclipse that was very outdated for a college kid, but I drove that thing into the ground and took the money that I would have put down for a car and bought a house. And then my mom passed away when I was 20. Unfortunately, I took her life insurance money and bought a condo. And then by the time I graduated college, I had 3 rental properties that I was renting out while paying my way through school, being independent, youngest of 8. So I didn't want to depend on mom. I couldn't depend on mom, and I didn't want to depend on dad. So I was very independent at this season of life. So when I graduated college, I took a career position within Cutco to teach other students how to do what I did as a college kid. And that's where the 5,000 people I've trained to do over 19 million in sales came from that industry. So I could get into the valleys. That's the origin story. The valleys of my 20s, I'll give the short version there, is market collapse, lost the properties, near bankrupt, negative $130,000 in debt with a 400 credit score, didn't want to get off the couch. So the valley of the 20s hit hard after a really strong foundation, and then climbing out of that valley with all those lessons to where I'm at now as accredited investor, doing really well financially and having time freedom, where last year, 2023, took 9 full weeks off, saved $100,000 or more. It was over 6 figures that we saved, still was able to, have a lot of freedom. And the real test, Jeff, that we can also go to if you want, in 2020, December 31st, my son was born, and we were in the NICU with him for 8.5 months. So he was born at 1 pound, 4 ounces. And my wife became a full-time medical mom. And I had to figure out how to replace her income. And that's essentially the birthplace of Better Than Rich and what we do now, which is to help entrepreneurs create predictability in their business. Because during that 8.5 months, my business ran without me and produced $250,000 in revenue and 6 figures in profits without me there. So that's where it was like, can I teach other business owners how to do this? How can they have time freedom to have a business that can run successfully without them? And now my business partner and I have helped hundreds of other business owners be able to buy back time, which is what we do now. So that's the long short of it. Lots of different places that we can go, and I would love to add value in whatever direction you see fit.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we've both used the term buy back time. I see you have buy back your time on your shelf there. Nod to Dan. He's a friend of mine, and that's a really, really good book, actually. If anybody in the audience isn't watching this on video, there's a book called Buy Back Your Time that really speaks to this concept. A guy I know, Dan Martell, wrote it, but that I think is probably the thrust of this conversation, right? It's a thing like when I actually got started online in 2008. I'll share this with you. The first sort of like learning module that I went through was this training program on affiliate marketing. And, I was like jumping through all those initial hoops of like getting my first domain and creating my first email account. And I remember spending like 4 hours trying to decide what the signature should be on my autoresponder emails. I'm sure you remember those days when you're having to make those first entrepreneurial decisions and everything seems like such a big deal. But the first domain I ever bought was buybackyourtime.com and I didn't even know what I was going to do with or how any of it worked. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So I'm really passionate about this concept. I also appreciated that you didn't just share your highlight reel, you shared your valleys. I was on a podcast yesterday on somebody else's podcast, and they were asking me about this show, and I said, at this point I've interviewed almost 300 call them outliers of success in different categories. A lot of them are entrepreneurs, but some of them are athletes, some of them are, military, some of them are lots of different categories. And they said, did everyone struggle or something like that? They're like, so what are the common threads? Does everyone struggle? And I said, yes, to a person. Every single person that I've ever talked to that's had outlier success has had what I would actually describe as outlier struggle. I mean, a season of not just like, oh, well, it wasn't as good as the other seasons. I mean, it was like awful. And I appreciate that you had one too. We're still batting 1,000 on that data point. So maybe dig in a little bit more. I'll also just tell you that I have a pair of Cutco knives in my kitchen and I love them. So, nice. But yeah, tell me more about, let's start there. Like, tell me about the really hard stuff.
So the hard stuff, the Valley of the 20s, I'll start there because that was foundational. Mom dies. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby boy. That's hard. That's something that all of us will experience at some point. But to do it at 20, it was pretty damn hard. And from there, then my self-worth was tied to my net worth. And then when that's taken away from me too, that was really hard too. And all of this was to get ahead. My dad works 6 days a week. He owns a plumbing business. He's still 83 years old to this day, still works 6 days a week in his plumbing business. So everything I was doing was to try to like make more basketball games than he did. You know, I wanted to overcompensate a little bit. I want to be a little bit more present dad. But the challenge was now I was spending my 20s recovering from this circumstance of financial undertaking that I had. So
when was this? When was
2008? Yeah, 2008. So okay. I graduated college 2008. I probably should reference that. So I'm 39. I'll be 39 in June. So 2008 market collapses. I'm 23 years old, 22 years old. It was awful. So my relationship I was in for 7 years, so much tension in the relationship because now my ego is struck because I have no money. I'm working my tail off in my direct sales business, doing everything. So I'm doing everything from sales calls, booking, recruiting, hiring, training. I have my own clients, my own customers that are buying Cutco. And then I had all these recruits that wanted to work for me to sell Cutco. And then I had my current team that was selling Cutco, all of them having my cell phone number constantly, like putting out fires, answering calls, being the bottleneck. So my relationship ended of 7 years. So like, it was hard. It was hard time. I went to a Tony Robbins event circa 2012. And that's when I walked across fire for the first time. And he said, my mess is my message. So from that place, I mean, I was a 7-time fire walker, but from that place was when I spoke that next year for 300 hours to the Pinellas County School District to figure out what that message was from this mess. And that's when I spoke to these students, spoke to about 20, 30,000 students, and crafted this message, which turned into my first book, Grab Tomorrow, Your Best Forever. That turned into 9 books, which turned into building a nonprofit on the back end where we provided 100,000 meals to the less fortunate, which turned into me speaking and book signings and all these things, which required more time. So now I had my direct sales business required my time. And then I had the book signing and all this stuff that was required time. So I still didn't actually get the desired outcome, which was to have time freedom. Which it led to me hiring my first business coach in 2016 to help me incorporate systems into the business to help me buy back that time.
So, okay, again, I think multiple things to double click on. First of all, the mess is the message. The 2012 UPW that you went to, where was it by chance? Was that in Orlando?
That was in California, LA.
Okay. Because I want to say
March of 2013 was the actual event.
Okay, yeah, because I'm trying to think when I went to UPW, it was within a year of that. The one I went to was in Orlando, but it was like right around the same time. But okay, so message your message. By the way, I think Tony actually might have taken that from AA. I'm not sure, but I've heard that from a number of people. But I deeply believe in it. So tell me about this. You said you went and spoke 300 hours to school kids. And I love that you said right up front, because I was trying to figure out my message. In other words, it's not like you had your message all polished and perfected. And so then you started booking gigs, because you and I both know how many people think they have to be perfect before they take action. But you just took immense action, not just one speaking gig, but 300, probably for no money or very little, I'm guessing, speaking in a school district, just to figure out what your message was. Tell me about that.
It's exactly right. I mean, I went to colleges all the way down to middle school. I remember speaking to Thurgood Marshall Middle School. I just would cold call, cold email, or just show up at these schools and let them know I believe, and one of my core beliefs, I think it's important to know, Jeff, is that I believe the change that I want to see in the world happens outside of the education system. So I don't believe that politicians or education system is going to create the change that we want. So I wanted to do something that I can share my views with the next generation of leaders. So that's why I went to the schools. So I could have gone to churches, but that was not, or temples or synagogues. I could have went in a different direction, but I chose schools because I had a captive audience, allow me to speak, and I could potentially have an impact on the next generation of leaders. So I specifically remember I would just go, I would talk about goal setting and talk about overcoming challenges and talking about becoming a better version of yourself. And some of the stuff I learned from Tony Robbins and just like my interpretation of what some of his lessons were. and doing state management. And so just like all these different, what we focus on is what we become, and writing down our goals and looking at them every day and pulling out some of the stories from historical figures and getting them up out of their seats. And it was so much fun. Like I really enjoyed it. And the 300 hours was like an hour in between like a lunch break. Sometimes I would spend a half a day. Sometimes I would spend the full day. I would literally just block up a Wednesday and just stay there from 7 a.m. and speak to all 8 periods and then go into my office because I just enjoyed what I was doing so much. But to your point, I wasn't making money. I eventually got my first paid speaking gig where they paid me for it was like $100 an hour to speak at an auditorium or something, but it wasn't about that. It was very much like, let me get off self and on purpose. And that was again, one of those Tony Robbins phrases, let me off self on purpose, because it was such in a funk. And that's really what would happen. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that season, Jeff, because I alluded to it, but if I didn't do those types of things, it wouldn't have led me to seeking the counsel of hiring a business coach, which wouldn't have led me to systemizing my business, which wouldn't have led me to our IVF journey with my wife and a stillbirth at 20 weeks into our hospital stay for 8.5 months. Like the valleys of the 20s and the tough and navigating that tough led me into the season of life as a dad and a husband to my now wife, and married 7 years. We have a 3-year-old who's thriving now. He was vent dependent on a ventilator for 2 years, but he's doing great now this last year. We have a new daughter who's 5 months old, and she's super healthy and friendly and happy and awesome. And this season of life that I'm in would not be possible if it wasn't for contributing those hours to the school and feeding those people that were less fortunate. And just contribution was always a big part of my life. I saw that from my parents, and I was able to apply it to later in life too.
So I want to talk about you, man, so much gold in everything you just shared. Congratulations, by the way, on your beautiful kids. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
I'm really, as a dad, 2 boys, 2 girls. I mean, that is the greatest role we'll ever get to play in our life. I know that, but I want to talk about this concept you referenced, state change. So I too had a down season, a major down season. And I too was able, in the depths of that down season, and at that time I had not, mine also, coincidentally, although I probably have had multiple down seasons, but the big one was also in 2008, Great Recession. I lost my rental properties, so I feel you on that. I didn't go to Tony Robbins then, but I was exposed very much to the idea of state change. I was actually exposed to it through my previous career as a jazz piano player. And the thing that I think is so great about having been a performer for a season, which, by the way, I would suggest that selling Cutco knives door to door, you're a performer. Like, you got to go out and do the thing on display, battle the nerves, you're literally at the level of the nervous system trying to hijack you and tell you can't, and tell you shouldn't, and tell you to just go play smaller and get an office job or something. Like I've also done door-to-door sales, and like there's those types of things that are how we forge ourselves. And so I wonder if you could take me into the bowels of some of those darkest moments when you're in the depth, hearing Tony say, knowing that for something to change, I got to move. I got to get out of this funk, because I think so many people, especially in this day and age, frankly, are in a funk. Like, we live in a society of funk right now. And there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of waiting for things to improve, I feel. And you seem to know that in that moment, you've got to be what changes. There's no waiting, right? So take me back to that moment. Like, can you remember a time when every cell of your body was screaming to just give in and die or succumb, but then something welled up inside you to say, no, I got to move and make a change?
Immediately, I might get my heart might come out of my eyes during this, but immediately was when our son was in the incubator, and he was 1 down right after we were born. He was born couple of weeks, and the unpredictability of the situation was really emotional. And there was a lot of uncertainty, tons of uncertainty, and nothing that was in my control. So the amount of desperation that was there was really painful, and then not knowing. And it was a really challenging season. And I figured out through counsel, through my coaches, that what is my minimum viable product? Like, what can I do? Like, you have to understand the backstory here is, like, I hired a health coach and I dropped like 20 pounds, 25 pounds. Like, I was on this mission. I was working my body. I was working my business. Things were going great. Like, this is COVID. My business just did like 2.5 million in sales. We provided 1,000 jobs during COVID. Like, we were crushing it in my direct sales office. And then going from this high of highs, peak like health state, peak business, peak financial, to being in the hospital with my son, fighting for his life, being 1 pound. Like, it was a whole shift of my whole world turning upside down. And from there, we figured out what are the two things that I could do. Number one is move my body. So I got a Fitbit, and it was 60,000 steps a week. That was the game. Can I just get to 60,000 steps a week? And then number two was I made a list called Dad Activities I put on my phone. It was all the activities that I was going to look forward to that I was going to do with my son. And I would read that list to him each day while I was in the incubator, and just like focusing on like the future of like going to Disneyland or Disney World with him, or taking the batting cages, or playing catch in the yard, like all these things. And I would just read them off to him and read them myself. And I would pace around the hospital room. And those are I would walk by the hospital, about 4 miles from my house. So I would walk to and from the hospital. These are the things that I could do. Those are my minimum viable product. Everything else beyond that was bonus. If I got some, working on the business time in, that was a bonus. If I, listened to a podcast or read a book or journaled, that was a bonus. And I just gave myself grace to do those two things: focus on this possible future and move my body, and everything else will kind of reveal itself. And that stacking after about 100 days of doing that led to some creativity, led to spring always follows winter. I don't know when this winter season is going to end, but when it does, I'm going to have a spring that I'm going to plant seeds for something that turns this into a gift. I don't know what that gift is going to be, but it's going to help some other people when I get on the other end of this. And September 10th, 2021, when we got out of the hospital, that's when I called my coach and I said, do you think we could teach other business owners how to build a business that can run without them? And he said, let's find out. And that was the birthplace of, what I'm doing now. But that was the moment when you shared being in the bowels of life. That was a really tough season for me. That was, 2021.
So I feel like the concept that you just described is something my therapist calls self-efficacy, which is the disciplined ability to concentrate our energy and our attention only on that which we can control, and to exclude from our focus that which we cannot control. So it's essentially the inversion of worry, right? And I feel like you just gave a really powerful description. I got to ask, you said your son is 3 now?
He is. He got off the ventilator last year, April 27th of 2023. He got his trach out. He got off the ventilator and then sprinted, got his trach out. And for last year, we're recording this May 22nd. So he's been off the ventilator and the trach for 13 months. He's learning how to walk now. He's learning how to swallow and speak. And, it's still delayed on some of those things, but cognitively, he's a 3.5-year-old. It's just catching up on his voice and physical therapy and stuff. So he goes through a bunch of therapies, but he just started a school this year in a pre-K, like an ESE pre-K class. And it's been helping him a ton with social skills. And he's a regular toddler with his tantrums and stuff, just at 3.5 versus 2, I guess, so, right. But he's awesome. He's a great kid.
So you've got that list of stuff that you're looking forward to.
We've been checking them off. We did a Disney cruise last year when he was still on the ventilator, and we did Disney World last year. So those were 2 of the 9 weeks that I took off. So we checked those off. We've done the zoo many times. Went to the zoo, Busch Gardens, took them there. Went to Dave and Buster's was on the list. Playing video games. Just a lot of a lot of small things like Lego towers. That's something that we do pretty much 5 days a week. Build a Lego tower that I like to construct. So small things as little as a Lego tower to a large thing like a Disney cruise. We've been checking a lot of these boxes off. There was about 50 or 60 on that list.
So I got to ask, which Disney ship were you on?
Oh, geez, man.
There's the Wish.
Maybe a Wish.
Yeah, the Disney Wish. Okay, so yeah, we're actually booked. Yeah, we're booked for our third Disney cruise. I have a 7-year-old girl that's obsessed. So
it was so good. It's so good.
Yeah, Disney. I know Disney's got some issues these days in the cultural arena, but nobody does. If you got kids, nobody does cruises for kids like Disney, man. It's been.
We booked Royal Caribbean for September, so we do have a cruise coming up in September on like one of their large ships, the World or something, like the second largest ship they have. It was such a steal of a deal. Disney was like going to be like 2.5 times the price, and it was like, all right, we'll just do this, balcony view and everything for a fraction of the cost. So, well, we're going to try them out, but I'm probably going to roll back to Disney at some point.
You do pay for the princess privilege at Disney for sure. It's not cheap. But no, again, I'm so happy for you. So, okay, so talk to me then about. I'm sure the audience is like, I think most people probably are, I don't want to say envious because that's kind of like a dark emotion, but I mean, people hear that like, oh, you're building Legos with your kid 5 days a week. Like, most dads they would love to do that, but they're out grinding a way to pay for the Legos, whether or not they get to play with them. Right. And so talk to me, what are some of the kind of core pieces of your methodology for helping people? And is it specific to business owners, or do you have, does it apply to, more traditional employees as well?
It's a good question. There's a lot more autonomy for a business owner for decision making, but I actually was quizzed on this probably about 6 months ago and said, what were the foundational principles that actually led to time freedom? And I call it being time rich because it kind of pairs with better than rich. So it's like being time rich. And I narrowed it down to 6 principles. And I could share those and maybe
Please.
like they might be relevant. So number 1 is boundaries. And boundaries is protecting my priorities, like making sure I know exactly what my priorities are and making sure I have boundaries protecting those. Number 2 is communication guidelines. So it's having specific, explicit communication parameters of how I want parties in my life to communicate with me, like what deems an email versus a call versus a voice memo versus booking a link. So just really explicit guidelines there. And that's for me is mainly business, which is like talent or like my staff or my clients or prospects, like so explicit there, but also relationships outside of that, even friends, like having, boundaries and communication guidelines for them. Number 3 is systems. And the way to define a system is just a series of if-thens. So if-then processes. So for business specific is breaking down the business into 4 pillars of attract, convert, onboard, retain for the client journey and the talent journey. So what are all the if-thens inside of each of those pillars specific to business? But, for someone that doesn't run a business, just what are your if-thens and how can you create predictability there? Number 4 is the playbooks. The playbooks is the documentation of those if-thens. So that way, I could premeditate the to-dos and the tasks and the process, the SOPs, whatever we want to call it. I know Dan Bartel calls it playbook, so I stole that from him because that's what was relevant and that's what was helpful for me. Number 6 is the team, is who are the who's that are going to be executing these playbooks. So that's where I have a cleaning team. I have for my home, I have a nanny that helps execute some of these plays. And then for my business, I have, my administrative virtual assistant team. And then I have my marketing department and so who are the who's that are going to execute those plays for delegation. And then number 6 is tech. And I think tech falls into like AI. How is AI used to support that team? How are CRMs or project management softwares or learning management softwares implemented to help support that team? So it's like the support to the team is that tech. So boundaries, communication guidelines, systems, playbooks, team, and tech is what I call the time-rich 6. And that was kind of drawn out of me about 6 months ago when I was quizzed on what would you say helped you create 9 weeks off in 2023 and still have, profits and still have freedom and move and still do personal growth. Like, and I also think it's important, Jeff, I only spend about 30 hours a week in business stuff. I have every Monday as a personal day, every morning and every evening off, like family time or personal time. Saturday, my wife gets some time where she goes for a massage or a facial or whatever she wants to do. And I'll take my toddler, and she usually keeps the newborn with her, but Sunday's family day. So literally for the last, I don't know, however long, 2 years or whatever, it's been a staple in our life where Monday's personal day for Mike, Saturday's personal day for Lindsay, Sunday's family day. We have evenings for family, mornings for Mike, and 9 to 4, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is business. And then 9 to 1 on Fridays, business. Everything else is open space for productivity, working on the business, strategy, self-care, family dinners, family meals, travel, whatever we want to do. So having those boundaries as number one is really where a lot of this started. Now, it didn't start there. It started with kind of like a couple of hours on a Monday,
Right.
But this is where I'm at now. And it was like a ramp to get here.
Yeah, so I wrote those 6 down: boundaries, communication guidelines, systems. I love your definition of systems, by the way. Just any sort of if then. I don't even know if you call it an automation, but it's like an just automated process, yeah. It's an if then process in our life. Playbooks, the team, and technology. That's honestly a brilliant framework. I took those notes. And so yeah, I want to speak really to the audience around these concepts. One of the first of all, it's really obvious talking to you that you've really thought things through, and that may be like, well, duh, but how many people have actually thought through the entirety of their life the same way their employer has thought through the entirety of their job? So it's like you go into a job and someone else has already thought through the mechanics, the time allocation, the resourcing, the workflows. Like they've already thought through how it is that you're supposed to show up and what it is that you're supposed to do, because that's what a responsible employer does. Well, we are the employer of our own life and we are the employee within our own life. And yet how many of us have really thought through the mechanics of just being alive 168 hours a week? I mean, I did the math. It sounds like you've got, 25 of those hours allocated to work. You said it was 9 to 4 Tuesday through Thursday and 9 to 1 Friday. So that's literally 25 hours. And I'm sure there's a few others goes in here and there, but I guess I hope the audience is hearing from Mike what I'm hearing from you, which is this does not just happen by accident. It takes incredible thoughtfulness and sort of meticulous planning and creation over time to construct a life that is, essentially that doesn't lead to regret. I mean, I'm in the regret deferral or elimination business. That's the reason, like my concept of life design is trying to spare humans from the number one deathbed statement that people say. This is on the National Institute of Health website. Is they did a survey among palliative care practitioners. They what are people's dying remarks, right? What do we learn from the dying? And the number one piece of feedback is, I basically spent my time living someone else's program for my life. That's what people are thinking about at the end. And you have essentially eliminated that from your life. And it's inspiring. When do you think you became, because I suspect you and I agree that this is doable, that like every person has a version of a more optimized, systematized life that produces much more time richness. Like I assume you agree with me in that statement, that everybody has some of this they can apply to their life to create more freedom.
Yeah, there's choice. There's definitely choice there. Even regardless of what the occupation is, there's definitely choice. And the reason why I know there's choice is because how much time, just look at your screen time on your phone and just see what that is. So just do an audit. That's one of the awarenesses that I had. It's like, let me look at my phone and see what screen time is. And it really anchored in here, Jeff, was when my wife asked me, what do you do in the bathroom that takes you so long? That was one of the prompts she asked me a while back, and I was like, good question. And I had like my little routine. I would check my WhatsApp, my email, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, and I would just clear my inbox and be there for like 25, 30 minutes, just like clearing some stuff out, numbing, not really knowing, not looking at my watch or anything, just clearing out inboxes as an example. And if I was that distracted while taking a dump, how distracted was I at the kitchen table or at a traffic light or other parts of my life? And that's kind of where one of those key moments said, okay, how much time am I really spending on this device? And I think anyone could have that awareness and say, wow, if I'm spending 4 hours a day on my device, compound that even if it's just 5 days a week, that's 20 hours, man. You can do a lot of stuff with 20 hours a week if you just mitigate that a little bit. So.
Yeah. Do you know what I always think when I hear stuff like that? Because I'm not immune to it at all, right? I mean, I've had the same epiphany for myself. But it's like, how little must I think of myself to spend so much of my life doing such meaningless things? And yet we don't think, I think like we're not actively telling ourselves, I think very little of myself, therefore I should waste my time. It's like, there's this deception in our mind that like it tricks us into acting towards ourselves as if we hold ourselves in low regard, because we would never waste that much of someone else's time that we cared about, right? I would never steal 20 hours a week from someone that I cared about, but why would I do it to myself? And yet how do we, I don't know. That was like somebody posed that question to me once, like, why would you do that to yourself? You would never do that to someone that you cared about.
My immediate response, that's a great question. My immediate response is, I think it's our environment that we're not we're not positioning ourselves to win. I think it's like us against everyone else trying to get our attention. So by not having an environment that positions us to have the reflection that you just had. So it's not that the reflection's not there, it's just that we don't have the awareness. So how do we position us to have that opportunity to become self-aware is really the question that shows up for me. How do we create an environment where the self-awareness could exist in the moment when I'm not aware of it? It's so like a little conundrum there, but
yeah, exactly. It's like it's a, what do they call that? A Mobius strip thing?
Yeah,
that flips on itself every time around.
Hey there, it's Jeff. So real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. I use text messages to provide unique value to the Unlock Your Potential community. These texts could just be random thoughts. It could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning, maybe giving an update on a special I'm running or some free training that I host for my community. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that is 702-996-3926. Let's get back to the podcast.
So, okay, I want to go back to your time in direct sales, your first go round in college, right? You said that you were not like a naturally social, socially well-adjusted kid. Like you said, you're kind of awkward growing up.
Yeah. I was overweight, bullied a little bit, pimples, braces, glasses, so I didn't have my first girlfriend until I was like 15 or 16, something like that. 17.
So it's not like you had this early childhood experience of being like the big man on campus. I can do anything.
No,
people respond to me. I get what I want kind of vibes. So Talk me through that first foray into door-to-door selling. Because I think that, how they say like the only thing people fear more than death is public speaking. I feel like door-to-door sales might actually be right up there with public speaking too for most people.
So one thing I will say, I wasn't like going to correct door-to-door. It's not like door-to-door is like solar, like literally cold door knocking. It was not what we did at Cutco. So it's a little different. It's very much a preset appointment. So we would call. So it was a lot more cold calling than door knocking. So we would call, book the appointment, schedule a time, and then go show up for the appointment. And it's also all word of mouth. So it's all referral generated. So the 1,000 people who bought Cutco from me all came from my initial friends and family list and then branched out from there. So it was warm network, referrals from that warm network, and those referrals have essentially is that. So it's a lot more in my opinion, easy to replicate for someone listening, because every one of us, if we're going to start any type of business, starting with your warm network is the great place to start, because there's already a no like trust factor. So that's what we teach our students. It's like, make a list of your, we would tell them who's going to buy knives from you. Who's the best person in the world that can buy knives? They are probably married. They probably have a job. They probably have a house. They're probably over 30 years of age. All right, make a list of all the people you know or you could get introduced to that fit that criteria. Mom, grandma, aunt, like we take them to the list. It's like, cool. How can you get contact info for those people? Great. What would you say to them? Here's a script of what you would say to them. Great. Book up the appointment, read this script when you get to them, and just show them how cool the knives are. Like, that's kind of the mentality there. So it's oversimplified, Jeff, for someone who's never sold anything ever before, and give them a playbook to say, hey, this is a great play. This is the play. Just follow this and you'll see some level of success. And I only did it because they were going to pay me $15 just to do the appointment, regardless of sales. So I did my math in my head. I was like, I was riding my bicycle to Stop and Shop, bagging groceries and cashiering for like $8 an hour or something. If they're going to pay me $15 to just show up and do a presentation, even if they didn't buy anything, well, I'll just do 10 of those a week, man. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll just rake it in. And then when I first made my first commission check, where I made more than the base pay, probably my 10th day on the job, I was like, damn, I made like $300, like doubled the base pay on those 10 appointments. I could make more. That was the epiphany. It was like game over.
Okay. So yes to all of that. And most people still would rather pull their own fingernails out. And I'm saying that from, I have multiple experiences, I'll say, to validate this. When I was in my 20s, I became part of a network marketing company that literally the entire product was convincing people to switch their electrical provider from the incumbent, which in Texas was Reliant Energy at the time, to this new company after they deregulated electricity in Texas. And the new company's power was cheaper. So like, all I was trying to get people to do was like the hassle of one phone call, like fill out a form and make a call to switch your power so that you can start saving money every month. I mean, so if there's ever been anything that was easy to sell, it should have been that, right? So I did this for 60 days. And the way it worked was you had to get your 10 customers to switch their power over. And then, I don't remember the exact rules, but then you could also recruit people to do the same thing, right? I got my 10 customers. And even then, the amount of resistance that I got from people, just literally like, dude, just give me like 20 minutes and I will save you, I don't know, $30 or $40 or $20. Like maybe it's 10 cents. Who cares? I'm saving you money every month. And so I got through my 10. That was tough enough. And then getting these people into my organization or my downline, right? I signed up 20 people in my 60 days. And I was like a hotshot. I got a $2,000 bonus check. I got to speak at one of the company's meetings because they're like, oh, this young 20-something musician, he got his 10 customers in like his first 2 weeks. He started recruiting people. Like, we got to get this guy on stage. He's going to be one of our superstars. In 60 days, I recruited 20 of my friends. And these were people that I knew either through church or from having grown up. So they were like a lot of like younger professionals, also in their 20s, but they were like successful people. There was like I'm going through my mind of a few of them. One was like a software developer. One was like a young guy in commercial real estate. One was, they were like, people that had the ability to go talk to people. I recruited 20 in 60 days. And then I said, okay, I'm going to focus on supporting my team of 20 people that I recruited to help them recruit. In the remaining 4 months, so I did this whole I was involved in this whole thing for 6 months. 60 days, I recruited 20 people. The next 120 days, my 20 people combined recruited one person. And I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. Because I just learned, I guess I'm just different. And I don't want to be elitist and categorize myself as I'm just different. But like, what is that? Like, I'm sure you deal with it. Like, what is it that is got people so stuck in their own way to not go do the simple thing that if they could do it and prove it to themselves and build the confidence muscle and build on it, it could unlock a whole new life for themselves.
I love the frame, by the way. So I appreciate that. And I'm smiling because there's so many similarities in a lot of what you're saying here. So first and foremost, nobody's going to do anything unless they believe they could do it. So it's got to start in their mind first. So one of the first things that, like, when it comes to recruiting, in this example specifically, it's like, why are you wanting to recruit your friends in the first place? So you probably, Jeff Lerner, had a compelling reason as to why you were able or why you wanted to recruit those 20 people. But the 20 people underneath you, more than likely, if they only recruited one combined, they probably didn't have a compelling reason. So I would typically always start with why, like, what is important to you, and finding some sort of leverage of pursuit of pleasure or avoidance of pain around whatever that desire is for each individual person. So this is how I've recruited 5,000 all through word of mouth. And this is how I've got 1,000 clients buy Cutco from me all through word of mouth, is I have to figure out what is their want, what is their desire. Some customers want a free piece of Cutco. Some customers just want to be the best to fill up a sheet of paper with hit a little smiley face. Like, it just depends. It depends on what their motive is. So if we understand what the motive is, then we can leverage that motive as a pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain. Once we do that, we want to make sure that the first step is the easiest step possible, and we make it as easy as possible for someone to take the first step, because 0 to 1 is the hardest. Once we go from 0 to 1, hopefully there's some sort of momentum that carries them from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or even 1 to 2, but 0 to 1 is hardest, from still to movement. So what is the simplest, easiest step? For us, it's like, here's a template, copy and paste this and send this to 5 people and just see if any respond. Like, that's like the 0 to 1. And then when they get the response and they get a positive response, it's like, oh, what? And the next step can reveal itself. But this would do, so if I had to like formulaically design it, it would be like, find their why, leverage that why into a first small immediate step, and then let the next step reveal itself. That's my immediate response to the question.
So how do you, I'm just talking like man to man here. Cause I mean, like, you can do it. I can do it. We actually know that anybody can do it if they want to do it. How do you, I'm seeking counsel here. How do you keep yourself from getting consumed with the frustration of believing in people so much more than they believe in themselves?
Great question. So the frustration, I want to feel into this. Anytime and by the way, I have decades of frustration dealing with college kids who I would believe in more than they would believe in themselves. Right. So just anchoring in that emotion of frustration for a moment and having a conversation where I'm believing in them more than they believe in themselves. A couple of words that immediately come through is empathy from their lens of the world, not my lens of the world. I would put myself in their shoes, because whatever their challenges or whatever they're seeing as an obstacle is real to them. It's not real to me, because I'm more polished and I'm more equipped and I'm more mature in where I'm at in my season of life compared to where they are at in their season of life. So the obstacle that they're experiencing or that they're trying to overcome is real to them. So I'm going to try to replace frustration with empathy first, and trying to really feel some level of compassion to suffer with. I want to suffer with them in that struggle, in that moment, from their lens, so I can at least try to feel and empathize what they're feeling, whatever that means for me. So that way I would try to shift the frustration to a different emotion. And from that place, maybe I would be able to try to tap into curiosity of, at what point in life have they overcome something that was uncomfortable, that maybe they were nervous or maybe there was a fear, but they moved on the other end of the fear and they found out there was a reward, and try to connect them to the reward that was on the other end of discomfort at some point in life where they can anchor in achievement or conquer, and that can build confidence. So that way I can stack more confidence on a previous confidence versus trying to get them from discouragement or fear into taking action. It's hard to take action from fear, but it's easier to take action from confidence. So that's probably where I would start. That's my response.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you. I'm very grateful for that answer. Obviously in my work with Entre, we have thousands of students a month raising their hand saying, I want to do this. I want to design my life. I want to put the pieces in place. And by the way, many Entre students are also in the audience for this podcast. So I'm literally talking to them right now. I was like, I want to do this. I want to design my life. I want to use the Entre process to identify what pieces I would need to plug into my life, what conditions I would need to make true in order to make possible the future that reflects the life of my design. Just because I design it doesn't mean I'm equipped to go after it right now. I might need to change some things. And so we have this whole process. And the one variable that we can never really account for is people's self-confidence, people's belief that no matter how many other people this thing has worked for, it could therefore also work for me. So I'm seeking counsel literally for myself and for the entire organization. And I really, really love that. By the way, I liked that you unpacked the etymology of compassion from the Latin to suffer with. If anybody didn't catch that, that was actually like a powerful moment for me. Like try to, don't just understand what they're feeling, but it's almost like that's what empathy is, right? Is feeling, to share a feeling. So try to, maybe it's almost like in order to empathize, because I do think, and sorry, I'm working this out in my own mind. I think that this is where I struggle to empathize. And you know what it is? And I know we're running up on time, so I want to actually unpack this real quick.
I'm loving this. Unpack it.
It is, I actually have a fear around empathizing with self-doubt. Because I have done the work in my life to overcome self-doubt. It's not like I was born without it. I've done so much work to overcome it and to develop a habit of action taking in the face of self-doubt, because it never really totally goes away. I think I'm afraid that if I empathize with that feeling, it might like crack the door open for it to creep back in. I'm curious if you've thought about it that way. Yeah.
That's a great reflection. And there's probably some truth there for an immature version of Jeff, but I think a mature version of Jeff wouldn't allow that to happen. But I think the awareness that you just had there's probably some truth there. There's this version of Jeff that might have an insecurity around self-doubt that's not quite worked through. So, and that's great. Awesome. But how do I leverage that? That's a beautiful gift that you could tap into that with yourself. Imagine that compounded 10x within one of your students or prospects. That's just like, I have that 10x. That voice of self-doubt is so dominant. That's why I have become a believer that tiny actions, I call them TADs, tiny actions daily, is what allows me to move beyond self-doubt. So how can I make it the simplest, easiest, tiniest, small first step? And for any of your students, that's what I would say. How can I get them the smallest piece of confidence that's directionally in motion forward so they could feel what progress feels like and give them a taste of confidence and gives them a little bit of a reframe. So that's what I have really built a lot of my success on in direct sales and what we currently do with our current clients and our students and our programs.
Okay, awesome kind of climactic pitch to wrap on. So this is, I feel like we've just worked through something, right? These are the kinds of things that we worked through with ourselves and others that unlock potential. So on that note, where can the world go to get more of you and learn more about your programs?
I appreciate that. betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. That goes directly to me. I'm actually doing a lot of market research right now, trying to learn how I can add value to people. So this is like a 40-minute conversation with me to help figure out what are your bottom 20% of your tasks that you want to offload to buy back some of your time. So that's what I want to help people with. So betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. At the bottom of that page, I'm doing a bunch of free, I'm calling them GSVs, stuff done, we'll call it. I don't know if it's a clean show. So GSDs. So I'm doing these 90-minute free sessions on getting stuff done. Like today I did one on inbox management, a full inbox management, helping you get that delegated. Last week I did ATB, avatar tone and brand. So your staff can write as you using an AI tone and how to create that. So betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. I'm calling them predictable playbooks. And these are GSD workshops that I'm doing because on the other end of this, I am building a mastermind, GSD Time Rich Mastermind group. I haven't launched it yet. So I'm just adding value, learning from the marketplace. And then I'm going to be launching that here in the next upcoming weeks to run a mastermind group called GSD to get stuff done with people versus like collaboration, education, which is great. I have those too, but this is just something a little different.
Super cool. I'm actually looking at it now. Betterthanrich.com, 90-day plan. Get your free delegation plan. Looks extremely cool. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you, man. This has been a really incredible conversation. I'm super grateful for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Okay. And of course, to all you viewers and listeners out there, you know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. You're the best part of the show. You're why we do it every time. So glad we got this time together and can't wait till next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
I want to feel like the smallest person in the room. Why? The proximity is power. One of the fastest ways to reset your identity is by be around other people physically if you can, or at least in your thoughts, and it will transform your future.